So on behalf of the organizers, the Inter-Parliamentary Union, in collaboration with International IDEA, with United Cities and Local Governments, and with UN Women, we want to extend a really warm welcome to all of you to join us for this roundtable on ending violence against women in politics and ensuring safe online spaces. Before we go any further, just a quick reminder that we have interpretation for today's conversation in French, English, Spanish, and Arabic, so you can find it at the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. Buenos días, un mensaje rápidamente para todas ustedes que se unen a nosotras y quisieran seguir la sesión en español. Tan solo para decirles que pueden encontrar la interpretación en el panel de abajo de su pantalla Zoom. Et enfin, bonjour et bienvenue. Et je voudrais, avant de commencer, vous signaler que nous avons un service d'interprétation disponible que vous trouverez au bas de votre écran, en français, en arabe, en anglais et en espagnol. Et si vous avez des doutes ou des questions, n'hésitez pas à nous écrire dans le chat. Now, back to English, and for context, this event is part of our joint project, which is called Advancing Women's Political Participation and Decision-Making through Social Norms Change, through Networking and Global Advocacy, which is also called, more simply, WYDE Women's Leadership, and it's funded by the European Commission and led by UN Women. And today, as part of this roundtable, it's a pleasure to highlight that we have with us members of parliament from all around the world, local and regional governments, WYDE partners and key allies from civil society, including leaders from the Generation Equality Forum, Action Coalition on Feminist Movements and Leadership. And we are gathered today specifically to mark this International Day for the Elimination of Violence against Women, and to use this space to build knowledge and bridges to combat this pervasive violence, right, that is targeting women in politics. And as like a reflection, I want to start with the idea that the internet has represented an unprecedented opportunity to make heard the voices that are traditionally excluded from public debate, but then it has been very quickly transformed into a mechanism that narrows the expression of women and marginalized communities. And just as hate speech and physical violence against women in politics aim to keep them away from power, online violence does the same to discourage them and to discourage all of the others that are watching, right? So that their voices become inaudible and they're made invisible. So the idea behind this roundtable is that it is urgent to produce a political analysis based on research of the mechanisms that allow this increase of violence online, and also to help us organize resistance and reclaim the space as a space for movement building for equality. So today's dialogue will focus on solutions, accountability. We will share effective measures to prevent, to respond, and to eliminate online violence. And we'll also explore the different kinds of partnerships and coalitions among us, among parliaments, local governments, civil society, women leaders, to transform online spaces into environments where women can lead safely and confidently. So our proposal today is also to think of messages and priorities that we will then share with other stakeholders, namely from the private and technology sectors, to broaden these alliances even more and to amplify impact. Basically, in terms of the agenda for this session, we will start with opening remarks from representatives of IPU and the European Commission. Then, after a presentation by UN Women of their campaign called Unite, we will start with a first session focusing on the reality of digital violence against women in politics and its impact, or impact in plural. And then there will be a second segment or session combating digital violence with solutions, with innovations, and with partnerships. And between the two of them, and at the end, there will be also open floor opportunities so that we can have like a collective debate or share more reflections. Just a quick point that in the interest of time, I will ask the panelists to speak for 4 minutes each, and the interventions from the floor to be about 2 minutes, so that we can have as many views as possible being shared, and that we make this a really interactive session. And of course, we encourage you all to actively engage, to share your perspectives in those moments of discussion or to prepare a question. You can also use the chat here on Zoom to share ideas, examples, and nurture the conversation. And finally, I would like to invite you, for those who can make it, to turn on your videos so that we can all see each other. It's always better, right? And now, without further ado, I want to start with the opening remarks of representatives from IPU and the European Commission. And I will now hand it over to Mrs. Tsovina Vardianian. You are a member of parliament from Armenia, as well as the vice president of the IPU Bureau of Women Parliamentarians. So thank you so much for joining us today and for opening this conversation. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Hello all, dear colleagues, distinguished guests and partners, dear participants. I'm very pleased to welcome you all to this virtual roundtable marking the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women. We have come together today to shine a light on a critical and growing issue, digital violence against women in politics. While digital platforms have opened new avenues for leadership and engagement, they have also become hostile spaces where women politicians face harassment, intimidation, and abuse aimed at silencing their voices and undermining their credibility. So our goal today is not only to understand the nature and scope of this digital violence, but also to identify solutions and partnerships that empower women to participate safely and confidently in political life. For the past decade, the IPU has been speaking directly with women MPs about the violence they face in their roles, with the goal of helping to develop effective solutions. Let me share two particularly alarming findings related to technology-facilitated violence against women in politics. First, across different regions, between 40% and 60% of women parliamentarians surveyed by the IPU reported experiencing online harassment, including sexist attacks, image-based abuse, doxing, and coordinated disinformation campaigns. These prevalence is far too high. Second, when considering violence in all its forms within Parliament, male colleagues are most frequently identified as the primary perpetrators. However, when we look specifically at online sexist attacks, intimidation, and threats, a different and more complex picture emerges. These acts are largely carried out by members of the public or by users hiding behind anonymous accounts. This shows clearly that digital spaces can magnify hostility and make accountability more difficult. We also know that certain groups of women face compounded risks. Young women MPs, women from minority communities, unmarried women, women living with disabilities, and women human rights defenders are particularly vulnerable to online attacks. And while both women and men are exposing to digital harassment, attacks against women or overwhelmingly gender-based, the prevalence of digital violence threatens not only the safety of women, but also the inclusiveness and strength of our democratic institutions. Today, we have an exceptional opportunity to focus on solutions, innovations, and partnerships. We will hear from parliamentarians Mayors, experts, civil society, international organizations, and tech leaders about the tools, strategies, and good practices that are already making a difference, the limitations and challenges faced, and the urgent innovations still needed. I hope that the discussions we have today will inspire action at both the policy level and within our institutions, ensuring that digital spaces are safe, inclusive, and empowering for women leaders everywhere. Also, to inspire such action, I invite you all to join the IPU campaign Achieving Gender Equality Action, Action by Action, and to contribute to much needed transformative acceleration of progress. Please click on the QR code displayed. And thank you for joining us, and I wish you all an enriching discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your opening remarks and for reminding from the very beginning that this question is a question of democracy. It's about making democracy real, and it's about making sure that it's about quality as well. Because it doesn't just, it's just not a question of like, pretending or having it as a structure. We need to also live this democracy and have it like accessible to everyone so that it becomes an experience, a reality, right? And this question of violence against women is a question of exclusion, strategically, like structural. And so it has like many impacts on democracy, but one of them is to have a whole part of the population excluded from it, right? So thank you so much again for your words. I want to turn now to Mrs. Brigitte Luguin. You are head of sector for gender equality and non-discrimination at the European Commission. And thank you to you as well for joining us and for opening this roundtable. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Cecile, dear organizers, partners, and participants. It's a true honor for me to be here with you today as we kick off the 16 Days of Activism campaign with UN Women, which, as this event puts the spotlight on combating digital violence, online harassments, abuse, and disinformation that severely impacts women's political participation and representation. We know violence in the web does not only target women. However, it is widely acknowledged and proven by IPU's own studies that women are more targeted than men, especially women with public and online visibility, women politicians, but also women human rights defenders, journalists, and women leading in public life. Violence takes sexist, sexualized forms and seeks to discourage women generally from taking part in political life. And sometimes the price is too high to pay in partner countries, but also here in the EU. Just a few weeks ago, you may have heard a Swedish political party leader stepped down after just a short period of being appointed party leader. And this because of the hatred and the threats she received, including online. And it's shameful that one of the world's most gender equal societies couldn't defend her. This is a global concern, and we therefore have to work together globally to tackle these very concrete threats to individuals, but to democracy as such, making sure that those affected have protection and that public and political space are inclusive and safe for all. So there is an issue of legal protection and of social norms, both, as we know, very much interconnected. UN Women has released the data that 1.8 billion women and girls still lack legal protection against online harassment. So laws and protection measures are often and in many places not adapted to address violence in the digital sphere. The European Union stands firm in its commitments to gender equality and women empowerment, also ensuring their safety in politics and public life. We are therefore very proud to support the WYDE Women Leadership Program and to work together with UN Women, International IDEA, the Inter-Parliamentary Union, and the United Cities and Local Governments. And together, we hope to foster women's democratic engagement and leadership by encouraging social norms change. I'm hopeful that today's discussion will lead us forward in evidence-based policy measures, in developing evidence-based policy measures that address this very severe barrier women face to fully and meaningfully participate in politics, and to contribute to a more conducive environment, online environment for equal participation. I thank you very much for being here today, and I wish you a very fruitful discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your remarks as well, and for highlighting also the difference that we need to take into account between violence in politics against both men and women, which is already a problem that we need to tackle per se, but also the difference of violence against women in politics when women are excluded and targeted as women. So it's a strategy to exclude them as a group. It's not something individual. We need to see the structural basis of this around that, and have this in mind, that the question is also to represent women as a collective, right? And when I say women, it's also the same question for marginalized communities, different territories, etc. So this is again very important, and thank you for setting the scene, right, for this conversation. Now, to complete this introduction, I want to turn to a colleague from UN Women, Mrs. Yeliz Osman. You are policy and program management specialist, and you lead the global EU-funded program that is called Act to End Violence Against Women and Girls. And you will present today the Unite to End Violence Against Women campaign, connecting this roundtable to yet another global campaign on the occasion of the 25th of November and the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence. So thank you for being here, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of UN Women, it's a real honor to be here with you today on the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women and Girls, and to kickstart the 16 days of activism. I did have some slides that I wanted to share. I don't know if you have them there and you're able to project, or if I should try to share.
Yes, we're projecting.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you so much. So this year, the theme, if we could move on to the next slide, please, that would be wonderful. The theme of the UN Secretary General's 16 Days of Activism campaign this year is Unite to End Digital Violence Against All Women and Girls, which, as we've already heard, is one of the forms of violence that is most rapidly escalating and constantly evolving with digital and technological advances. The campaign this year is anchored around 7 advocacy objectives, including policy and legal reform to criminalize and end impunity for all forms of digital violence, as well as to strengthen the accountability of perpetrators. The second objective is to strengthen regulation, accountability, and transparency of technology companies who have a critical role to play in ending digital violence against women and girls. Thirdly, to enhance access to justice and to strengthen responses and support to victims and survivors of all forms of digital violence who continue to be dismissed, not taken seriously, or provided ineffective remedies or solutions when they report digital violence against women and girls. To strengthen protection for women in public life who are at particular risk of online violence because of the work they do, their visibility in online spaces, and because of their advocacy on gender equality and women's rights. And we're also calling for increasing investments in digital literacy and digital resilience of all women and girls, and for strengthened investments in prevention, in transforming social norms, and in innovative solutions to better harness technology in the prevention of violence across the online, offline continuum, and looking at how we can really disrupt the manosphere and online misogynistic networks and find alternative ways of engaging men and boys, particularly targeting the movable middle. And finally, as always, we're calling for enhancing support to feminist and women's rights movements through core, flexible, and long-term funding. Can we move on to the next slide, please? So violence against women and girls in digital contexts is not a new phenomenon, but we know that it's rapidly escalated in the last 5 years in the shadows of the COVID-19 pandemic, as women's lives shifted online for work, education, access to services, and social activities. And there continue to be significant gaps in data, but one global analysis suggests that the prevalence ranges from 16 to 58% globally. While all women and girls are affected, we know that certain groups are at heightened risk and are disproportionately impacted by digital violence. For instance, young women and girls face significant risks because of the extended periods of time that they spend online. And women in public life, as we've already heard, or women with high levels of public visibility, including women in politics, women human rights defenders, feminist activists, journalists, are also at heightened risks of digital violence because their participation threatens the dominance of male power structures. And digital violence manifests as a form of backlash for not conforming to gender roles assigned to women. UN Women research has found that up to 4 in 10 women candidates in local elections and up to 7 in 10 women in parliamentary elections have experienced gender-based negative discourse, hate speech, disinformation, and the sharing of private information and threats while campaigning. And it's important to note that we know that violence online isn't something that occurs in isolation. Often it transitions offline and vice versa. So we really need to look at how technological change is impacting violence against women and girls across the continuum. At present, as I mentioned, violence in online settings is not considered by many people still as serious as some of the forms of violence, despite the significant harms that it can cause, including the significant psychological and health impacts, but also the social, economic, and political consequences, including silencing, self-censorship, women withdrawing from public life, women withdrawing from their professional lives, and the intergenerational implications as young women are deterred from entering certain professions. And we also know that online violence is often connected to or escalates into offline physical and sexual violence, and sometimes in the most extreme cases can result in femicide. One global study by UNESCO found that 73% of women journalists reported experiences of online violence, and 20% of women journalists had been attacked or abused offline in connection with the online violence. Under the EU-funded Act to End Violence Against Women and Girls programme, UN Women is undertaking similar research building on this study by UNESCO, which looks at online violence against women human rights defenders and violence against women's rights activists. And the preliminary findings of this research are due to be released on the 9th of December, and it has similarly alarming findings about the impact of artificial intelligence on online violence against women and girls, as well as the trajectory of online and offline violence. If we can move on to the next slide, please. The last Secretary General report on the intensification of efforts to eliminate violence against women and girls in 2024 focused on tech-facilitated violence against women and girls, and it highlighted 3 key emerging and intensifying trends. First is that anti-rights actors are increasingly using online spaces to push back against women's rights, and they're creating a hostile digital environment for women and girls, with coordinated attacks against women that are engaged in public life, and in particular, women's rights activists and anyone that's advocating on women's rights or gender equality. The second key finding of the Secretary General's report is that technology is reinforcing misogynist norms. There's growing evidence of how online communities of men's rights activists, incels, and other online communities on the manosphere are fueling misogyny, spreading disinformation about violence against women, or minimizing and normalizing violence. For instance, one study found a 59% increase in violent rhetoric over the past year alone, and content that excuses or even encourages child sexual exploitation. And thirdly, we see how the rapid growth of artificial intelligence is intensifying violence against women and girls, both by facilitating the spread of targeted disinformation, as well as the proliferation of image-based abuse and deepfake pornographic videos. And according to one study, 90 to 95% of all online deepfakes are non-consensual pornographic images, with around 90% of these depicting women. The next slide, please. I won't go into all of the details, but there has been an emerging normative framework at the international and regional levels to guide action so that we can ensure that technological advances do not create new risks of violence and harm for women and girls, and instead that they can be leveraged to achieve gender equality. Some of the key developments include the agreed conclusions of CSW 67, where member states express deep concern at the scale and impact of violence against women and girls that occurs through or is amplified by the use of technology. In 2024, the Global Digital Compact articulated shared principles for inclusive, fair, and safe global digital governance, and it explicitly includes the elimination of sexual and gender-based violence that occurs or is amplified by the use of technology. Also in 2024, the UN General Assembly adopted the first ever resolution on violence against women and girls in digital environments, where member states agreed to take immediate, effective action to prevent and eliminate violence against women and girls that occurs or is amplified by the use of digital technologies through strengthened legislation, investigation, prosecution, and enhanced protection and support for all victims. It also calls for strengthened prevention, regulation of platforms, safety by design, and accountability, and recognises the interconnection between violence that occurs online and offline. And finally, just to mention, the UN Cyber Convention establishes an international legal framework to combat cybercrime, which also includes tech-facilitated violence against women and girls, and calls for the criminalisation of the non-consensual dissemination of intimate images. And at the link on this slide, you can see a document, a publication on normative developments that's available on UN Women's website that provides a more detailed analysis. If we can move on to the next slide, please. UN Women has been tracking measures introduced by member states to prevent and respond to tech-facilitated violence against women and girls through our global Ending Violence Against Women database, as well as through a desk review of member states' reports for the review of the 30th anniversary of the Beijing Platform for Action. And we found that member states are increasingly prioritising measures to address tech-facilitated violence against women, with a total of more than 200 measures reported overall. And that's 69% of member states reported at least one, but in some cases more, measures to address tech-facilitated violence against women and girls. However, what we also saw is that only 27% of these reported measures are specific to tech-facilitated violence against women and girls. Often they're broader measures that are focused on cyber violence or online safety, and they integrate a focus on tech-facilitated violence against women and girls. So there's certainly opportunities to strengthen the focus on the specific experiences of women and girls. And the most common measure reported by member states is the adoption of new laws or amendments to existing relevant laws and support services for survivors. So that gives us hope that we are moving in the right direction. If we can move on to the next slide, please. But despite the growing focus on tech-facilitated violence against women and girls globally and the increase in measures put in place, there continue to be significant gaps that persist globally. And I think we've framed these across three categories. The first is legislative and regulatory frameworks. And as already mentioned by Brigitte, fewer than 40% of countries have laws that address digital violence, and this means that close to 2 billion women and girls have no legal protection from online harassment or cyber stalking globally. And even where legislation does exist, laws often don't include the full spectrum of tech-facilitated violence against women and girls, and they fail to keep pace with the rapid technological change. And limited capacities of law enforcement to adapt to technological advancement and the global borderless nature of cyber violence of cyberspace, sorry, means that online crimes often occur outside the jurisdiction of law enforcement agencies. That continues to be a major challenge. And we also know that online violence is still treated less seriously than other forms of violence against women and girls. So that's why a huge focus of the Secretary General's campaign this year is to really highlight the real-world consequences of digital violence against women and girls. Another gap is around prevention and responses. There continues to be very little evidence of what works in preventing and responding to digital violence, and we urgently need to fill these gaps in evidence so that we can enable investments in evidence-based strategies and interventions, and to be able to provide guidance and model responses that can be adapted to local contexts. We also need to focus on strengthening the capacities of the traditional violence against women service providers so that they are able to better respond to and provide adequate remedies and solutions to women and girls that are experiencing digital violence. And finally, there continues to be very limited coordination and cooperation with the technology sector and global standards to inform tech sector policies for preventing and responding to digital violence, as well as accountability frameworks. And there's a huge potential to leverage technology in social norm change and in preventing violence against women and girls, both online and offline. So we really need to strengthen cooperation with the technology sector. And finally, there continues to be very limited data globally. We have seen an increase in research over recent years, but the lack of a universal definition or measurement framework means that we don't have comparable data globally, and there continues to be very limited data on the experiences of some groups of women and girls, particularly, for example, women with intersecting identities or women in rural contexts or who have limited connectivity and digital literacy. And there continue to be knowledge gaps on the perpetration, which is key to designing effective prevention strategies and for engaging men and boys. We can move on to the next slide, please. And I'm coming very close to the end of this presentation. Through the EU-funded Act to End Violence Against Women and Girls programme, we have designed a shared advocacy agenda with women's rights movements, co-creating messages which has a call for 3 urgent actions. The first is a call for bold investments in prevention and responses to end digital violence. The second is strengthened financing, protection and support to women's rights organisations who, as we've mentioned, are at heightened risk of digital violence against women and girls. And thirdly, enhanced accountability, access to justice, and the full and effective implementation of laws to prevent and respond to digital violence against women and girls. You can find the full set of key messages on the link on this slide, as well as the social media pack that's available on the ACT Trello board. And we would really encourage you all to amplify the voices of women's rights movements throughout the 16 days of activism. And if we can move on to the last slide, please. I know my time is up, but just to mention that today we have the official UN commemoration of the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women. And for those of you who are interested and are not based in New York, there's also the possibility to connect online through UN Web TV. And I just wanted to highlight some forthcoming resources that UN Women will be releasing during the 16 days of activism. Today we'll be launching 2 policy briefs, one which is a model legal framework, and the other is a gender responsive policing guidance brief. We also have a number of knowledge products that will be released over the 16 days, focused on AI and its impact on violence against women and girls, a compendium of promising practices. And under the ACT to End Violence Against Women and Girls programme, as I mentioned, we have the preliminary findings of this research on online violence against women, human rights defenders, activists and journalists, which will be launched on the 9th of December. And also a rapid assessment of tech-facilitated violence against women and girls that synthesises the global data and trends in this area. And finally, we'll be releasing research on the manosphere and pathways into perpetration, as well as our corporate strategy on tech-facilitated violence against women and girls. Thank you so much, and I will end the presentation there. And sorry if I've taken a bit more time. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you really for grounding this conversation with so many insights that we will come back to, but it was really, really helpful. I want to make just a very quick comment on when you show this timeline of the global frameworks, right? It's also a way to show how this problem was constructed and recognized publicly as a problem, right, in the public debate, and then with consequences and impact on policy making. And this I want to mention because it's important as part of this conversation, that it's also anchored in the work of practitioners and different organizations from like many years, in particular the work led by IPU and by International IDEA. So yeah, and also of course linked to the different testimonies of women, and like before and also as part of the Me Too movements, it was for sure like transformative moments in this sense. And we hope that these frameworks at the global level can then help you who are in parliament, who are in local governments, and support your work. Not something as like to burden even more the work that you have to do, but to see them as like tools or frameworks that you can use in daily work. So this is the ambition, and count on us to facilitate that as well. Now, we are moving to the first session on digital violence targeting women in politics, and we will focus here on reality and impact by sharing evidence, key findings, and trends from recent research and from real life experiences. So we'll have the contributions of 4 panelists who will have 4 minutes each, and then we'll have a moment of discussion. And I want to start with the first 2 interventions to offer grounding evidence as the foundation for this discussion. So we'll start with research, and then we'll connect this research to lived experiences of women in elected positions at national and local level. So I want to start with Mrs. Christina Wilfor. You're a global champion of democracy and campaigns and elections expert, and you're also the co-founder of She Persisted, as well as professor at the George Washington University Eliot School of International Affairs. So thank you for being here today, and over to you. We would like you to share the work of your organization and any latest data on digital attacks and disinformation campaigns against women in politics that you would like to mention today. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here with everyone and for us to collectively address what is a significant problem in our societies. But the problem is really grounded in the design of technology. And this is where She Persisted has been focused. How do we look at this not as an outgrowth of violence, but a byproduct of information warfare and authoritarianism? So the gender community has been very slow in linking what we're seeing online and the attacks against women as a threat to democracy and not just an extension of hate. So this is one fundamental finding from our research, is that when misogyny and information warfare is used, its aim is to fracture society. And the good news is that the world is much less misogynistic and sexist offline than it is online. So why I say that, and this is the bad news, is that it is manufactured to be so in order to achieve broader goals. And so the evidence that we see in mapping this from Moldova to Ukraine to Brazil to Kenya in deep level forensics analysis is the way that authoritarian and far right forces, really the anti-rights actors, as was talked about a second ago, exploit gender to polarize societies and undermine elections. And they're able to do that because of the design of social media. So when we talk, as we should, and I was glad to see this in the recommendations, about strengthening the regulatory and legislative approach, it needs to have teeth. So let me talk about the 5 recommendations that we have based on the analysis of we've seen in the weaponization of this arena, the attacks on women leaders, the silencing and self-censorship that many girls and women now experience is because of the authoritarian tech stack at work. And so this is not a moment to create small level collaboration with social media companies who are often providing money and funds to civil society organizations in a form of soft capture. This is an opportunity to design a protection and regulatory system that gets at root causes. So I would emphasize as the number one recommendation is regulation with teeth, because you have to understand this is about power and the growth of this power that is now in the hands of around 15 men. So 15 men in the authoritarian stack arena, those who are driving technology, who are the heads of companies worth billions of dollars, who are leading digital monopolies, they will be deciding the future for every woman and girl. They will be deciding how many babies should you have and of what race. What type of elections you can have, how war and conflict is dealt with. So the first fundamental recommendation is to leverage change against this authoritarian tech stack. And it requires a different language and a different set of policies. So starting with some of the highlights of the need for regulation in the previous session, I would build upon that. If something is already viewed as illegal in a country, let's say voyeurism, then online voyeurism is not a stretch. If the stalking is already within your legislative and legal framework, online stalking should be an extension of that. If forgery and distorted imagery is already an issue legally, then digital distortions that target women leaders is not a stretch. So we have to be strategic in how we approach it and realize that not all regulation is the same, and there's a way in which to pursue this that gains better power and leverage over the most powerful companies in the world. The second recommendation is we are in a state of emergency and we need more support for the virtual war rooms, legal aid, media for women who are on the front lines, whether those are women in parliament or civil society leaders, pretty much anyone who is trying to have a voice online. The third recommendation, we need this cross-border solidarity. This is a collective democratic defense opportunity. And I use these words very intentionally, which may not be the language that you're used to. I am talking about these issues as warfare because it is a warfare. It is this dangerous to the future of societies and the women and girls in them. Now, lastly, let's talk about language. We do need to reclaim masculinity. I'm less positive about the researchers who came up with the phrase manosphere. We do need even better language to describe this sphere of activity. There is a set of anti-women, dangerous masculinity that's being stoked because the social media platforms also built audiences and subsidized the growth of this arena. So even something like aggressive masculinity online should not be separated from the way that social media aided in the development of these dangerous antisocial ideas. I spend many hours in the dark corners of the internet, and not even dark corners anymore, mainstream websites that advocate things like young boys should break their jaw in order for it to grow back in a more manly way. That's a real thing on social media. So we need to reclaim this masculinity, build positive norms and influencers, and also understand the role of social media in subsidizing the growth of these dangerous extreme networks. And we need the serious investment. I'm really glad to hear the shift in the language in the presentation above about the targets, the opportunities, the way to anchor this in violence. And now we need to scale counter narrative and strategic communications so that we can equip women with the same tools that the bad actors have, who operate in some of the most sophisticated ways throughout media markets around the world.
Thank you so much. So many things, but mostly or among everything that you've mentioned, I think it's exactly very important to come back to the beginning and see how biased from the beginning these digital platforms are, in the sense that they're created by a very specific kind of group of people, which has consequences for every other persons that want to use them. And then from design, they are based on this encouragement of violent interactions as their way to function, right? And to promote more and more engagement. So thank you so much for this reminder that it's about power. So it's also about question of power redistribution, and it's about seeing the global picture and targeting the different social norms that we need to address, so that then we can transform the interactions within and beyond those platforms. Thanks again. I want to turn now to Zenia Hillel, manager of the Gender Partnership program at IPU. It's always a pleasure to work together lately within this WYDE framework, and also with you and colleagues within the Generation Equality Action Coalition on Feminist Movements and Leadership. So to contribute to further setting the scene, I'd like you to share the findings from the latest IPU studies on violence against women in politics, with this focus on digital violence. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cécile, for the moderation. A big thank you also to the speakers who started us off at the beginning of this meeting. And I would also, like you, Cécile, like to very much recognize the partnership that has us together with the European Union, UN Women, International IDEA, IPU and UCLG in the WYDE initiative framework. With a big thank you and welcome to the women politicians who are connected with us today, including women parliamentarians from Monaco, Ms. Beatrice Fresco. Hello, we're very happy to see you again here at the IPU, or online at least. Ms. Maria Medhain from Bahrain, Ms. Dalal Zayed from Bahrain as well, Ms. Naeem from the Maldives, Ms. Ali Kent from Australia, Ms. Christelle Vanga from Congo, Ms. Centeno from Ecuador, Ms. Al-Jaida from Qatar, and a very special hello and welcome to Madam Speaker of the South African Parliament, Madam Speaker Diziza. Welcome on this meeting. I also would like to recognize former MP Pam Damoff, who has also joined us. You are all very welcome, in addition to women activists from notably the AC6 coalition, and women from local level government as well. You are all most welcome today, and I hope we will have interesting discussions that have already started now. I wanted us to start by reading a testimonial by a woman parliamentarian from Asia Pacific, giving it a testimonial of what she faced as a sexist online attack. I really went through a difficult period when a video accusing me of making pornographic films went viral. It really affected me psychologically. This is a better than any definition of what online attacks can be towards a woman in particular. Next slide, please. The IPU has carried out 4 studies to uncover violence against women in parliament by surveying women parliamentarians at the global level in Europe, in Africa, and in Asia Pacific. We surveyed women, hundreds of women parliamentarians, but also women staff of parliament to uncover all forms, all acts of violence that take place in parliaments. And as you can see, we published a global study in 2016 and then studies focusing on regions in 2018, 2021, and 2025 most recently. And now we have started a survey in the Americas, which is ongoing. And these studies have revealed the magnitude of gender-based violence in parliament, and in particular against women parliamentarians. And what we found are alarming rates of gender-based violence against women worldwide and in each and every region where we carried out these studies. You can see on your screen that rates of psychological violence among the women we surveyed, women MPs we surveyed, were as high as 85% in Europe. But then other regions are really not far from this proportion. Sexual violence, 25% of women surveyed in Asia Pacific, and this goes up to 39% of the women surveyed in Africa having reported sexual violence. Economic violence exists also throughout the different regions. Physical violence, unfortunately, as well, as high as 29% or 33% of the women surveyed declaring it having happened. Next slide, please. The manifestation of psychological violence are diverse. They include sexist remarks and behaviors, psychological harassment and or intimidation, threats of death, of rape, of beating or abduction. They also include online attacks. And as you can see, the rates are as high as 60% in Asia Pacific. And we are going to look into that a bit more. The prevalence of online sexist attacks, what we found through our studies, especially the most recent one from 2025 in the Asia Pacific region, is that the 60% of women parliamentarians surveyed in this region reported having been the target of hate speech, disinformation, image-based abuse, or doxing online. The rates were not very much lower. They stood at 58% when we did the European level study, 46% among women parliamentarians in Africa, and 42% of those surveyed globally. We've also looked into perpetrators and found out that more than 50% of incidents of sexual harassment against women MPs took place on parliamentary premises and were committed by male parliamentarians. However, when it came to online attacks, 85% of cases of online attacks, 59% of online threats, and 45% of psychological harassment came from the public or from other actors, including organizations. We, of course, heard from the women parliamentarians that online harassment was often anonymous or diffuse. In Europe, 66.7% of the perpetrators were completely anonymous and non-identifiable. And of course, now this is even becoming more difficult with AI-generated trolls and bots acting online. The types of online aggressions that we could unpack were as follows. So 38% of online aggression against women MPs were related to hate speech. 27% were related to disinformation with incorrect and most often misogynistic information shared with the intention of causing harm. 17% were image-based abuse, including deepfakes, and 18% were doxing with sharing personal information without any consent and other tactics, but always aiming at harming women because they are women. If we look at the prevalence, causes, and consequences of non-reporting of online violence, we also included that in our surveys to understand how reporting was happening, or actually, in reality, how reporting was not happening. And in terms of prevalence, we've seen that 32.6% of women MPs from Europe, for example, reported to technical intermediaries or other services. 24% of women MPs in Africa and Asia Pacific reported such acts of online violence to the police or to online platform officials or to a tribunal, only 24%. The causes of non-reporting are, first of all, a lack of mechanisms existing to report. And then even when such mechanisms to report exist, they are not necessarily safe or seen as safe by women parliamentarians. And if they are seen as safe, they are not necessarily seen or being efficient for reporting for women parliamentarians. There's also always a fear of reprisals, reputational damage, or political backlash if reporting is done and things are known and more light is shed on the attacks. The consequences of non-reporting, however, are extremely dangerous because the true scale of online violence is then underestimated in policy and in legal responses. I think this is part of what was referred to earlier in Yeli's presentation. The need for more evidence, for more data is definitely there. And the fact that women cannot report or don't feel safe, or that mechanisms for reporting are not adapted enough, means that we are missing data and evidence. Another consequence of non-reporting is how the disproportionate effect on the participation of young and marginalized women in politics, and also the silencing of voices and the reinforcement of unequal power dynamics in parliaments, but also, of course, online. I wanted to make sure to also speak about intersectionality, reality, that are extremely impacting as well. We found out through our studies that young women MPs, unmarried or single women, women with disabilities, women from a minority background, and women members of opposition parties are particularly targeted by offline as well as online violence. In the Asia Pacific study, for example, the rates of psychological and sexual violence were higher among young women and women from minority backgrounds, as well as unmarried women. And yeah, please. I wanted us also to, hear the voice of a woman parliamentarian from the Asia Pacific region, showing dehumanizing and destructive online sexual abuse. She told us that she was subjected to intimidating messages and attacks, and all kind of vile insults were directed at her. There was hate speech too, tinged with racism and class-based stigmatization. So it's not only, violence against women, it's also violence against women with racism combined with class-based stigmatization, showing how much intersectionalities are really affected. Speaking about that, if we look in particular at how young women parliamentarians are targeted, in particular by online gender-based violence, you can directly see how specifically targeted they are online. You can see the variance rates. If you compare in Asia Pacific, for example, online gender-based violence faced by women MPs in general, it stood at 60%. If you look at participants in our surveys who are women parliamentarians under 40, this jumps to 71%. So it's a plus 11 point percentage. In Africa, very similar findings as well. Young women are, more targeted by online gender-based violence, and even more so in Europe. If you look at the high variance there. Of course, damaging effects, you know them, you've named quite a few of them already today, but definitely, yes, they constitute a barrier to women's participation, visibility, and influence in politics. They undermine the human rights of women parliamentarians. They affect psychological and physical health. In the Asia Pacific study, for example, so 63% of the women MPs who experienced violence said that they were seriously affected and that they were suffering as a result. There's also a huge damage to reputation and morals that is caused by online sexual abuse and sexualized disinformation that affects especially women parliamentarians in conservative or small communities. This violence also challenges the very concept of a representative and inclusive parliament and democracy, especially with the connections that exist now between democracy and online participation and online inclusion. Of course, this violence online perpetuates gender inequalities and keep them going and amplifies them even further. And they create a hostile, degrading, and abusive environment in parliament, in other institutions, and of course, much more broadly online and on the net space. Now, I wanted us still to look at solutions. Cecile, if you allow me a last minute. Thank you in advance for that. So looking at solutions, definitely totally in agreement with what was said by Yeliz. And as at the IPU, we work with parliaments, we very much look forward to even furthering our partnerships to support laws on online violence, criminalizing online threats, toxic and misogynistic hate, the work with technology platforms through parliaments and through parliamentarians is a must, and that's something we also need to turn attention to much more. Advice and support to survivors, including women MPs, that would have been targeted online, and guidance on how to expand and enhance online protection is absolutely necessary for all, and in particular for women. And as well as, and this is a proposal I think we need to look into more as well, to offer targeted support for women from specific groups that are particularly targeted: young women, minority women, and women politicians who are spokesperson for gender equality. They are also particularly targeted. Inside Parliament, the IPU is calling for measures such as internal regulations, independent complaint and investigation mechanisms, training on addressing online harassment, but also training for men, parliamentarians and men workers in Parliament, as well as the establishment of support services and counseling for victims and survivors. With this, I thank you very much for your attention. Cecile, thank you for your indulgence with me. And I hope this presentation was useful to all our participants. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Zaina, and thank you for also highlighting something that I want to take into account for the rest of the conversation, and that we already touched upon, but very clearly highlighting the continuum of violence, which has different layers, right? It has the first layer of seeing them as a spectrum, a range of different forms of violence, seeing also how they intersect with other inequalities online and offline, and so very important this reminder of having an intersectional approach. And then also the last layer would be this connection between the violence that women can experience at individual level and then the collective impact, because they're used, and specifically on when it's about women in politics and when it's online, they're used to show off the intimidation and expand it, right? So that it doesn't have only impact on the women who receive it, but it's also a way to intimidate and exclude so many other women. And we can think about how many women would be in politics now if they had entered, if they knew that they could or were supported, or there was not so much risk there, right? So thank you again. And now I want to continue anchoring this discussion in the lived experience and now the embodied priorities of women who directly took part in politics at national and local level. And I first want to say that it's a real pleasure to count on the presence of Mrs. Pam Demoff, a former member of Parliament in Canada. You have served as Parliamentary Secretary to the Ministers of Health, Indigenous Services and Public Safety. You are also were Vice Chair of the Standing Committee on the Status of Women, among many other responsibilities, but we had to pick a few. And you are also the CEO of the Pearson Center. So I would like to invite you to share with us any echoes between these findings across the world and your personal trajectory and experience on this topic. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me to join this panel, and as we kick off the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence. And one fun fact is I actually was a member of the IPU for the whole time that I was a member of Parliament, ending as president of the Canadian IPU just before I left. So I was a member of Parliament for 10 years. Starting in 2015 until our most recent election in April of 2025. And I distinctly recall having a meeting with the Liberal members of the Status of Women Committee, where my colleague Sean Fraser, who was a member of the committee, said the type of online harassment that I get is very different than the women on the committee get. And that would have been in 2016 or 2017. So this isn't a new phenomenon, but I did find that it got worse as time went on. And it was one of the contributing factors to me leaving politics. I found that the constant harassment, both online and in person, just had changed the toxicity that I was facing. I also found that police did not take it seriously. So the House of Commons did set up protocols for offices, and someone had mentioned how it's an attack on democracy. Well, my community office used to be open to the public. We had to change that on advice of Parliamentary Protective Services, that it would be locked and entry would be by appointment only, which limits access to elected officials, right? Also, I had been outspoken my entire time as a parliamentarian on gun control. And I found that the gun lobby was extremely effective at mobilizing their troops. So, you know, if there was legislation that we were passing, or if I made a comment on it, I would be inundated with threats of rape, you know, memes that were designed with, it was really awful. But they were very effective at mobilizing. And I also found that members of parliament from the opposition, from the Conservative Party, while not directly threatening MPs, would post our information with misinformation that would again mobilize the troops. And so at one point, one of the Conservative MPs posted my email address, and we had thousands of emails that my staff opened up a subfolder called misogyny to have them sent into that. And I don't think we talk enough about the impact of this on staff. It has an impact on elected officials, but staff are often the ones that are reading social media, that are reading emails. And, you know, none of us could do our jobs if we didn't have staff that worked for us. And I know that it impacts their mental health as well. I did want to mention that when I announced that I wasn't running in May of 2024, and why, the mayor of one of the communities in my Ridington, Marianne Mead Ward, reached out to say, is there something I can do? I think maybe we should start a pledge. And so it's called electrespect.ca, and it's for elected officials, but also the public to sign, that we will treat one another with respect. Because I will say, someone mentioned how I found the vast majority of people are being bullied into silence. They're not misogynistic, they're not threatening politicians, but they're afraid to challenge what is being done because they're being bullied. And so this pledge is a way of showing which elected officials have agreed to treat each other with respect. We can and should disagree on policy, but we should not be disagreeing. We should not be attacking one another. So I see I've used up my 4 minutes, and that's not very much time. But thank you so much for having me. And I want to really thank the IPU for the good work that you've been doing for years and continue to do on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you so much on behalf of IPU and all partners behind this roundtable. We know it's so short, but thank you for already guiding the conversation in so many directions at the same time and complementing what we've said already. Thank you for highlighting the impacts on the staff, because we don't think that much, and it's part of this global impact that violence against women has in general. And also thank you for referring to something that we already mentioned, which is the mapping of the different actors with whom we should work in collaboration with, or also protect us against, because we need this to also like find and create strategies to better protect and amplify women's voices, right? And I want to also highlight something that your experience also showcases, which is it's not only a question of access to politics, it's also a question of permanence in politics. And so many women are pushed out of politics. They manage to enter it, but then it's not there that the problem stops. It's also where it continues in so many ways. So thank you so much for being here today. And I want to turn now to Miss Elisa Pereira Nunes. You're the Deputy Mayor of Tours for Gender Equality and International Relations, and you're also the Vice President for Citizen Transition and Democracy at Tours Métropole, and you are the Chair of the Gender Thematic Group at Cité Unie France. And of course, you are a very powerful voice within the feminist municipal movement led globally by UCLG, which unites locally elected women from all continents, all generations, to work together on these topics and much more. So as part of this conversation, I'd like to invite you to share your experience and your perspective from the local level, the specific challenges that you might have faced, and any similarities or specificities comparing the local level to other experiences shared just now. And yeah, the floor is yours in whatever language you prefer.
Bonjour à toutes et à tous. Merci vraiment à UCLG et à l'ensemble des partenaires de l'initiative WYDE Women's Leadership. Évidemment, le thème qui nous rassemble aujourd'hui en ce 25 novembre nous place à l'intersection de trois types de violences. Donc la première, la violence politique, dont on constate une forte recrudescence ces dernières années, de la tentative du coup d'État aux États-Unis le 6 janvier 2021 au défilé de mouvements néofascistes dans les rues de Tours il y a quelques semaines. Nous voyons progresser des mouvements d'extrême droite, des mouvements très violents dans la stratégie première de générer de la peur et de l'intimidation. Deuxièmement, nous constatons de nombreuses violences sexistes et sexuelles. Beaucoup de chiffres ont été avancés, je ne vais pas en énumérer plus, mais en 2024, l'année a été marquée par une hausse de 11% des violences répertoriées. Et enfin, le sujet d'aujourd'hui, les violences en ligne, le côté obscur d'Internet qui est de plus en plus manifeste. Et par exemple, en 2021, il y avait 41% des Français qui déclaraient avoir vécu au moins une fois une situation de cyberviolence. Nous le savons bien, ces trois types de violences se renforcent les unes les autres. Et le monde digital agit comme un facilitateur et un amplificateur des violences politiques comme des violences basées sur le genre. Et en effet, si les cyberviolences sont diverses et variées, il est reconnu qu'elles sont en priorité orientées contre les jeunes filles, les femmes et les personnes LGBTIQ+. Ainsi, en Europe, en 2020, 74% des femmes déclaraient avoir déjà été victimes de violences en ligne. Et plus récemment, en mai 2025, en Europe, il est constaté par une étude du CCRE que les femmes en politique étaient à plus d'un tiers d'entre elles à exprimer le fait de subir des violences, de la cyberviolence. Et donc, ces formes multiples, quand elles visent les femmes, elles prennent souvent un caractère sexuel, voire pornographique. Elles portent des menaces de violence sexuelle ou physique et bien sûr, dans la vraie vie, notamment par les techniques du doxing. Et donc, par ailleurs, ces violences sont intentionnelles. Je ne vais pas revenir sur la notion puisque ça vient d'être fait, mais cette dimension est vraiment importante à considérer. Et bien sûr, quand ces violences s'adressent à des femmes politiques, elles portent de plus en plus et quasiment systématiquement sur des accusations d'illégitimité ou d'incompétence liées à leur genre, comme si, par essence, les hommes politiques étaient plus compétents. Et ces violences peuvent être très difficiles à faire reconnaître car les tribunaux peinent vraiment parfois à qualifier juridiquement la différence entre une critique politique légitime et une insulte misogyne intolérable. Et donc, l'objectif de la violence envers les femmes politiques et leur impact est bien connu, puisqu'elle vise à dissuader les femmes et les minorités de genre à s'engager ou de demeurer dans la sphère publique. Et elle pousse les cibles de ces attaques virtuelles à l'autocensure, voire à ce que les femmes et ces personnes se retirent des réseaux sociaux pour garantir leur santé mentale et leur sécurité. Et bien sûr, cela participe à l'amoindrissement de leurs paroles politiques dans le débat digital, alors qu'elles sont déjà sous-représentées dans la sphère publique. Pour donner un exemple concret, il y a quelques jours, nous avons eu une réunion femmes élues locales du département d'Indre-et-Loire, dans lequel se situe la ville de Tours. Et effectivement, nous avons parlé du fait de nous auto-censurer sur les réseaux pour ne pas subir ce cyberharcèlement, pour ne pas que nos familles soient menacées, que ne pas notre intégrité soit menacée. Et à titre personnel, ça fait longtemps qu'il y a des réseaux sur lesquels je ne suis pas ou plus, comme Twitter ou X. Et je limite vraiment, vraiment mes prises de parole et mes posts parce que je ne veux pas m'exposer à cela et je n'ai pas le temps, ni le temps, ni l'envie. de confronter des commentaires absolument atroces qui pourraient me dissuader de vouloir persévérer, voire aller plus loin. Alors évidemment, il y a de nombreuses institutions et d'ONG qui documentent ces allers-retours continuels et de plus en plus structurés des violences masculinistes, à la fois en ligne et hors ligne. Et dans le champ politique, les récents travaux sur le backlash témoignent de dynamiques d'entraînement entre partis ultra-conservateurs et groupes masculinistes en ligne. Mais il ne faut pas être dupe, puisque ces violences en ligne s'inscrivent dans ce continuum des violences aux femmes de manière générale, et surtout les femmes politiques. Il y a un réseau que j'ai évoqué, qui s'appelle le Élu local, qui estimait que ces violences avaient à 74% été commises envers, bien sûr, des femmes élues locales, et que 82% de ces violences avaient été commises par un de leurs collègues élus et 31% par des administrés. Donc, c'est même au sein de l'ensemble de la sphère politique, en ligne comme hors ligne, que doit se mener la lutte contre les violences de genre. Et je préciserai que l'échelon local, premier échelon d'engagement pour les femmes en général. Donc, si déjà à l'échelle locale, elles sont dissuadées ou elles sont empêchées, on aura de plus en plus de mal à en trouver vraiment de manière plus impressionnante dans les plus hautes responsabilités politiques. Je ne reviendrai pas sur les différentes lois qui visent à protéger les femmes et les citoyennes qui s'engagent en politique, mais ces dispositifs, même s'ils existent, sont, comme Pam Damhoff l'a évoqué, difficiles à mettre en place. Et bien sûr, contribue encore une fois, cette difficulté à mettre en place ces dispositifs contribue à en réfréner certaines à vouloir s'engager. Et donc, si ces textes ne reconnaissent pas le caractère parfois spécifiquement sexiste et genré des cyberviolences envers les élus, leur limite majeure reste surtout dans leur mise en œuvre, qui pêche par des manques de moyens humains, financiers et bien sûr de considération de ces problématiques de genre. Et je voudrais terminer par dire que ce qui est vraiment acté, c'est que nous devons pousser nos représentants au Parlement européen, notamment engager un réel dialogue interdisciplinaire pour renforcer l'intégration entre les politiques publiques de lutte contre les violences sexistes et sexuelles, les violences politiques et les politiques publiques du numérique, en portant une attention particulière à la montée des discours masculinistes en ligne, à leur spécificité et surtout à impliquer le niveau local dans la réflexion sur ces textes, ainsi que l'application locale des textes et surtout l'anticipation de l'application locale, puisque on sait que voilà, dans la pyramide, si on ne traite pas et si on ne soigne pas la base, on aura du mal à trouver des femmes au sommet. Merci.
Merci beaucoup et merci pour ce rappel très clair de l'importance de travailler dès le niveau local, puisque c'est le point d'entrée dans la carrière politique de tellement de femmes. Ça fait aussi écho à ce qu'on disait tout à l'heure sur la question des violences que subissent en particulier les jeunes femmes, parce que c'est aussi une manière comment dire, euh, avancer vers celles qui pourraient commencer et à quel niveau et d'en faire une priorité. Je remercie aussi la référence à la question des collègues, parce qu'en fait, dans la même manière qu'il faut qu'on fasse cet état des lieux de d'où viennent les violences, il faut aussi avoir ce regard à l'intérieur même de la politique. Il faudrait presque commencer par là et voir quelle forme de solidarité, quels mécanismes, quels protocoles peuvent être mis en place pour que à l'intérieur même des partis, des groupes politiques, etc., ce soit un problème qui soit réglé. Et je dis ça en particulier parce que pour faire écho à ce qui était mentionné tout à l'heure sur la question des représailles, souvent elles viennent en premier de ces groupes politiques-là, à l'intérieur des partis, à l'intérieur des groupes politiques auxquels les femmes appartiennent et où elles ne trouvent pas ou pas assez de soutien. Et enfin, je vous remercie également pour cette question qui doit peut-être aussi guider notre travail ensuite à chacun et à chacune depuis nos organisations, cette question de la difficulté à faire la différence entre les violences en politique et celles qui sont en particulier contre les femmes. C'est-à-dire que pour avoir des outils pour mettre en évidence quand il y a ce caractère systématique. Et c'est quelque chose qui est encore très ambigu. Et c'est ambigu dans la vie réelle, mais je pense que c'est un levier vers lequel on pourrait travailler pour ensuite avoir des solutions qui soient directement visées, enfin qui puissent vraiment permettre d'avancer et qu'on arrête avec l'argument général de ça fait partie du travail, on savait à quoi on s'engageait, etc., etc. Voilà quelques commentaires là-dessus et merci encore d'avoir partagé cette expérience et le point de vue des élus locaux. I would like now, we have some time to open the floor for any reflections that you want to share on this first session in terms of realities and the impact lived and like through analysis that your different organizations might have done. So please feel free to raise your hand on the Zoom thing or in the chat if you want to share anything that could complement this conversation, any points that you think that we have not touched or not touched enough. Also, I have a few like questions that can also guide this conversation, but want to first open to see if yeah, there is any of the participants who want to come in at this moment. And we'll have another open floor moment after the second session where we'll focus more on solutions. So now it's more about sharing any like experience, views in terms of the reality that we face now. So that then we have this as a foundation for this discussion on solutions. I don't see hands just there, but if you can't find the hand rising thing, then you can just jump in. Please feel free to do that as well.
Hello, good morning. I'm Monica Orellana, Secretary General for International and Interinstitutional Affairs of the National Assembly of Ecuador. I'm very glad to all the speakers that all the information that they shared, there is a lot of knowledge. And for my perspective, of course, I'm agreed with that there is a lot of, we need more data to know in which countries are these inequalities that affect women in parliament, women in politics. I don't know if there is a platform very confidential that women can put their different kind of situations that they experience during her public service journey. But from my side, I think that we should learn about how women will work in different countries, no matter where we are. And I don't remember who mentioned, I think there was Cecile but we have to see us as a group, because I think that as a group, women, we became more powerful, and the voice that is silenced in other countries, we can raise our voices as a woman, no matter in which area or level of power you are in a city. So thank you for all the information that you are sharing today. I'm really glad to be here today.
No, thank you so much, and thank you for highlighting that it's also like in those collective spaces that we can also find strength, find solutions, hear about different experiences, because it's also, if we go back to the basis, one of the key objectives of this kind of violence is to make us feel alone. Right? Alone and not competent enough to face it, because then when we suffer all the impacts, it's always a question of the mental health of one person, the impacts on one person's family, etc. But it's when we come together, such as during this session today, that we can see and really feel, because it's not just about knowing, but really seeing each other's faces, that we know it's a structural problem. And then based on this, we can see different strategies to work together. And one of them, I want to mention something that we do, and that is very similar with IPU's work that we do from UCLG at the local level, which is this importance that we give to women's networks. So we work with and support locally elected women's networks, just as IPU supports parliamentarians' networks, so that women can come together from very different contexts and share, but also not like go beyond the sharing, but also build a movement and have this as the back. When people have your back, even if these people are like kilometers away from you or in a very different context, you can use their experience, use this strength as also part of your advocacy work towards, let's say, your government to work on different laws, etc. So, for instance, just a few weeks ago, we had an encounter with different locally elected women, and there were locally elected women from Bolivia who shared how they succeeded through their association, the Association ACOBOL, to pass a law on violence against women in politics. And this is very inspiring, and it gives strength, but also material to all of us united. So thank you again. I see another hand raised. So please go ahead, Juliette, and present yourself as well. Thank you.
Yes, so Williet from Organization for Women and Children in Liberia. In the case of violence against women in elections and politics, we develop a document with our context on Liberia. So from the previous presenters that we had on the table, I noticed that we have similar issues, especially in the digital spaces. But more specifically to the context of Liberia, most of the women in politics or doing in the electoral process in Liberia, most often they use traditional powers to enforce women and limit to enforce the limitation of women being in political spaces. So there were cases in 2020 elections with one of the senators in Liberia here, wherein they had to bring people on board to secure her because they had to put the country devil outside in her county that she ran for elections. So the country devil seized her ballot boxes, and they didn't want to give them because she won the elections. And at that time, Liberia never had a clear picture of what violence against women in elections or politics was, or a clear definition. So we had general understanding from international spaces, from other countries, but Liberia never had this clear context on where to seek help, like a clear roadmap. So based on that, when that happened, civil societies, especially grassroots women institution, came on board and said, we need to work together to see how best we can have a result. So they work with this particular senator from Bapolu County, Liberia. And then she was able to get help. She had access to due process, and then she eventually won the elections in her county. She's currently a senator in Liberia. Based on that, under the LESP UN Women Project, this SOP was funded. So OWASH was funded to create this particular SOP. So within this document, we did a study on the definition, creating a clear roadmap where when you have traditional, whether is this violence against you that have been perpetrated is traditional, be it digital, be it economic, where you can seek help. Because if you have this, with this information in this document, create a clear roadmap for women in Liberia to have an understanding also how to get access to due process during elections period. So I just wanted to share this, and we have this document. We can also share with everyone that is on this call, which will be helpful working with other people. Maybe it might be similar to other African contexts around countries that are surrounding Liberia. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for highlighting, in line with the conversation that we were just having with Elise, the importance of working internationally and being able to share resources. And here I also want to thank all of you who have shared resources, tools, studies in the chat, because it's very, very rich. I hope we can find a way to have them all together and share at a later stage. But it's very helpful for sure. So if you have anything else to share, please feel free. And thank you as well for mentioning this work and these alliances that we need to build with grassroots organizations and also traditional leaders, because in the end, it needs to be a whole of society commitment, right? It cannot be just something that we see as something that only happens in the political life, because as we've mentioned, these forms of violence, these inequalities, they reflect and reinforce inequalities and violence that happen in any like sector or dimension of life. And also in the end, it's the same actors. If we go back to that, if we have this mapping again of who is targeted and from where comes those violences, then it's way beyond only the political arena, as broad as it is, right? So it's definitely linked to the work that we need to do in alliance with civil society. And I'm also thinking of alliances with movements that are not so much, and it's not that easy, right? But it's also important to see how communities or people are organized in movements, be it movements of women, movements of young leaders, for instance, or youth, and see how we can connect and work together with them in parallel on fostering and supporting their engagement in the political life, and also on broadening and creating cultures of equality and democracy from the local level to the different arena where we work. So thank you again for sharing this. I don't know if there is any other comments also from the panelists, if there is anything else that you would like to mention before we go into the solutions part, where we'll have like again a lot of space for many ideas.
Cécile, I'd love to jump in. I think,
Great.
I see Christina as well.
Yeah.
Christina, do you want to go ahead? Please go ahead.
Just real quick. So research and information gaps. I'm a researcher. So I would like to spend all my time looking at data. Here's what I would say is absolutely the data needs to be contextualized to the places where your political culture is driving the nuances of this topic. On the other hand, we have enough information to act. So I shared in the chat the digital toolkit in this section around the landscape. This applies to every country. What I've tried to do there is shortcut into what research gaps help us manage better this state of emergency. So if we look at the countries that now, I think 15 case studies, we've done as She Persisted, and there's many other case studies, and IPU's data is just a wealth of information. Very good to hear some of the updated walkthroughs of that. So thank you. So when we look at this topic, if we're trying to help women gain back ground lost by the attacks, it's less valuable to look at hate and toxicity and measure that, and rather look at the kinds of attacks that do damage at the voting booth or change attitudes towards women's leadership. And so the four main attack lines that are important to research and understand so that we can reverse the impact of them. The four ways women are attacked, no matter the country, culture, or progress on gender equality, is on qualifications, 1, trust, 2, social acceptance, likability, 3, and emotional control, 4. So research should not be broad in terms of incidences of violence. It needs to be very narrow into what type of attack is someone being targeted with, so that they have a chance in the online environment to fill in that gap of what attacks on qualifications mean, what attacks on trust mean. I'm working in many contexts, including in Germany, where a agreed upon judge was just forced to resign in a recent situation based on disinformation, digital distortions, character assassination. So there's damage that's being done. So we need research that is more targeted, and we have enough information to act. So I encourage every organization I'm talking with to think about what level can you work on solutions. Are you trying to deal with individual attacks of a particular politician or woman leader? That's a different set of activity. Are you trying to address the normative standards. I looked at the pledge from Pam. Thank you for sharing. And that is the normative language needed to then really cause a conversation among society about what does this reflect. But then the third level would be, are you working on policy and law? And are you working on the tech accountability and digital platforms arena? That requires a different type of research and knowledge. So those are three different levels that we now need to sophisticate our ability to work into that and think, okay, where am I showing up? Which one of those? We can't boil the ocean, but we can make a nice cup of tea. So what does your tea look like? And how do you dig into those areas?
Thank you so much. I think this is so helpful to guide the conversation that we'll have now on the solutions, because exactly, we cannot, we need to be very clear about what to tackle, where, with whom, etc. I want to also highlight something that came to my mind now as you were speaking, and then we can see if it resonates with anyone, which is maybe also we would need to think about how to repair damage. So in the tools or resources that we can propose to locally or women elected in different positions, include a way of how they can respond, for instance, respond to disinformation, respond to the attacks on their reputation, so many of those things like that. Maybe it would be helpful to also see guide or see what is working for whom, how, and how we can expand that. I think Xenia, you wanted to go as well.
Yeah, thank you, Cecile. I'd love to, but I think there was Ivona Pio who had requested the floor.
I saw a hand, but then it disappeared. But please go ahead. We have time if you want to go.
Yes. Can you see me? Can you hear me?
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. I'm sorry, I just checked into my hotel room, so I have to find the right light. Yes. This is a little bit difficult for me because I'm currently just experiencing online attacks that start. Sorry, I'm in Switzerland and I'm a parliamentarian in Switzerland. So I started getting a stalker started stalking me in 2022. Started online with just the person looking for me and contacting me through all of my social media. And I speak to everybody because I think I represent all the marginalized groups. I replied, hello, how are you? Thank you for contacting me and joining my network. And I left it like that. And they kind of just followed what I was doing. But the online stalking moved from contacting me online to calling me and just saying weird, nasty things. So every time I would block the number, and then the person, because in Switzerland, if you're a public figure, they require you to have your telephone number and your address also to be public. So it's very easy to find that if somebody's a parliamentarian. So the person found my address and actually appeared at 6 a.m. at some point at my home. And I was doing some online classes. I was teaching some online classes. So when the doorbell rang, I thought it was an irritated neighbor or a neighbor who wanted something. And I went to open it without even thinking. And this stranger is standing there and then comes in and starts to fight me. They actually physically started attacking me. Yeah. And they were able to get into their building because somebody downstairs opened, and the same person who opened downstairs could hear the fighting that because he was shouting and doing all sorts of stuff. So the neighbor came upstairs to try and help me. And in the process of the neighbor and I trying to get this person out of my house and actually physically fighting with him, he pushed me and hit me so many times. I hit my head on an edge, which later I had to go to the emergency for that. But in the process, we were able to call the police, who came and left with him. Now, this was in 2022. And unfortunately, as women, we are taught not to voice some of these things that you go through. It's almost like you're ashamed of talking about some of these physical things, because I began questioning myself and asking, what did I do to to provoke this? What did I do to bring this onto myself? Because he kept on telling me how I was this nasty woman and I needed to understand how this country worked and all of that. You end up blaming yourself. So I didn't speak about it at all at that time. And I thought it had gone away. Then he tried again in 2023 with telephone calls and I ignored it. And unfortunately for me, it escalated from that to recently I was attacked on the streets by the same person who happened to have been stalking me constantly using my social media. They found out exactly where I was going to be at a certain time and came over and actually physically attacked me. And it was so bad. It was during the day and it didn't matter. We passed through a group of people and I was shouting for help and they could see we were fighting each other and nobody reacted. Yeah. And eventually, okay, I was able to call the police and the police came again. And the worst part of it for me was already in 2022, when the police came to my house, there was one female police officer, but she didn't show any empathy towards me. And that kind of made me doubt myself at that time. And this time round also, when they came, he was shouting and saying, this is a domestic matter, leave us alone. And the policewoman wouldn't believe that this wasn't my husband. It didn't matter how many times I told her. So it was difficult for me at the stage of the scene to decide to file a complaint. And I needed to go to Geneva to come and do something actually with the IPU. So I told them, just retain him there. I just want to go home because I was thinking of, I need to get away and all of that. So I didn't file a complaint on that day. The next day, he contacted me again from social media and said, I am going to make you pay for this and all of that. And the threats became even more violent, although the attack was already violent enough and I had some bruises and I had fallen down a couple of times, but they became even more violent. And I was still doubting whether I should report this to the police because of the way the policewoman had reacted when she came on the scene. You know, they had to check up in their records and found out that he had attacked me already before she believed that this wasn't my husband. Yeah. So finally, I convinced myself to go and do a police report. And during the police report, again, the lady officer who was taking the report asked me why I didn't report on the scene. And I couldn't really bring myself to tell her I didn't feel heard or seen at that time. And even that time, she didn't make me feel heard or seen. And she told me, well, you know, this is a restraining order on this man. And I said, he has been stalking for years now. And it has escalated to a point where he's not only come to my house, he identifies me on the streets during broad daylight and attacks me and still doesn't have a restraining order. Unfortunately, or fortunately, the guy appeared that weekend on Saturday at my apartment again. He rang the doorbell. I saw him, and this was some minutes to midnight. I saw him. I didn't open the doorbell. I called the police, and he had left. They came about 20 minutes later, and they looked, and actually one of them was one of the men that had come when I was attacked during the day. He's like, what is it again? And just that reaction already puts you off from explaining what you have just gone through again. So anyway, the next day on a Sunday, he appeared again, and this time he came with company. I don't know what he intended to do, but he didn't come alone. And luckily, none of my neighbors downstairs opened the door for him to come up. But because I could hear loud noise, I peeped out and I saw him and somebody else. And I was still debating, should I call the police? Will they believe me? Now, it sounds absurd, but somebody who's actually a politician who's known in the area, you're debating whether the police will believe you, you know? So anyway, the next day I did manage to get enough courage to go back to the police. And this time they said, okay, maybe with this information, now that he came back again, it's really, he's stalking you and he doesn't want to leave you alone, we will bring him in for questioning. They did finally question him. It has turned out he has been doing this for quite a long time, and he mentioned repeatedly to them that his end goal was to try and kill me because he doesn't agree with the way he politicize. Yeah, and it was 14th of what we were able to use, it lasted 4 days. It was until 18th. And so they advised me, use the Victims Help Center to try and get a longer restraining order. The form that somebody took out for getting a longer restraining order in Scotland is really complicated for those who speak the language very well, and it's tedious, it's long, you need somebody to help you. Thank God I was able to fill in, and then wait for the court to decide whether the restraining order will be permitted or not. I can understand why victims of such harassment and all that don't go through all of this, because the hurdles that are put in front.
Sorry, Cecile, I think we've lost
her, right?
Yvonne.
Yeah.
I think her connection was getting a bit cut.
I can give her the floor back when she comes back.
Okay.
And in the meantime, I have been noticed that a member of parliament from the Maldives would like to take the floor.
Yeah.
Or you're back. Even we lost you for a few
Yes.
minutes. I'm not sure how the connection works for you.
Okay, I'm here, I'm back, and I'm actually just about to finish anyway.
Okay,
I was
now
just
we hear you. Go ahead. But you're muted now. We heard you. Okay, I think now it's okay. We hear you.
Yeah,
We
okay.
see you.
I said
It's
I'm just
perfect.
okay. Okay, thank you. I'm just about to round up in so the body is really complicated. I don't know how it is in other countries. I was listening. If this is what women in public office or public figures have to go through, we need better laws. I was exactly coincidentally that right now actually prove what they have been working on since June of 2024. Stalking should actually be able to be punishable by law. Until now, it was not. And everybody I spoke to told me, forget the incident and just push on with whatever it is I was doing, because I was that be able to help with the law. Luckily, been approved now. It will take effect on 1st of January next year. But I think other countries really work on something like this, because sometimes stalking can escalate where you begin to the professional decisions who have stepped down. I have been seriously considering the option, because it's, for me, what my life. Yeah. So I would really urge other countries and other parliamentarians, if there's any way you can find some policy, some law to put in there, and another way to find a better way for those who are attacked to be heard and seen, that would really help. Thank you. Thank you for giving me the floor.
Of course, and thank you so much for sharing your experience, and also for this call that you have mentioned at the end. Thank you so much for highlighting in a very embodied way the connection between the offline and the online connections, and offline and online violence, and the connections between the two. And I think something that is very important that you've also mentioned that complements the conversation that we're having is that you've mentioned the length of this, the whole process, right? So it's years and years of violence in different forms. And it's important that we also take into account the cumulative impact that this has on you who receive it, also on everyone who is around you and supporting you. So this is, definitely something that we also need to think about. It's by, like, among all the layers that we're mentioning now around this, the topic of violence against women in like digital spaces, another layer is this question of time, right? One other thing that you've mentioned that I think is important, and there's no easy solution to that, but I think this group is a great place to also open the difficult boxes, is the solidarity and the empathy among us women. which is not always as easy as it looks like. And it's also something that we need to think beyond the politically correct, the polite and nice thing to do. We also need to think of this solidarity as a strategy and a form of resistance. So it's not just superficial, but it's a real commitment and strategy to face together these forms of violence. And then the conversation also needs to go beyond us, in the sense that it's very good and very important that we do these and create these spaces where we talk among ourselves, but then it's always something that from outside can be seen as a problem of women. So we should just resolve it between ourselves and then we'll be fine. It's not like, also in terms of the tools and the research that we do, it's also something that needs to go beyond our circles, and go towards those that need to be aware of that, and also the capacity building that we need to do very urgently, as you've mentioned, for instance, with the police and also with the justice system. So we need both conversations, the safe places that we create, such as today, and also the broader conversations, so that we expand these alliances and can work together towards solutions. I think, Zaina, you wanted to take the floor from a few times ago, and then we'll go to the next session.
Cecile, if you don't mind, I think Ms. Naim, who is a member of parliament from the Maldives, had requested the floor a while ago. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Cecile.
Yeah, thank you very much. I am Anara Naim, MP from Maldives. I am glad that I have participated with all of you in this session. I heard a lot of stories of violence and a lot of information I got. Thank you very much. I would like to give some ideas or some solutions, or a toolkit for prevention and protection for this problem. I will mention some tools. Tool number 1, personal security and digital hygiene. Practical steps, strong passwords, two-factor authentication, privacy setting, how to report abuse or on major platforms. And tool number 2, peer-to-peer and mentorship support networks. Example of normal and informal networks where women MPs can share experiences and strategies for resilience. And tool number 3, parliamentary protocols and cross-party solidarity. Showcase a model code of conduct for online behavior among MPs. Highlight examples of male allies publicly condemning attacks on female colleagues. Tool number 4, collaboration with tech companies and civil society. Examples of successful partnership with platforms for faster response times. Working with NGOs that provide real-time monitoring, legal support, and counter messaging. Tool number 5, public awareness and counter narratives. Campaigns that celebrate women's political participation and expose the tactics of online abusers. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing these different tools and initiatives and ways forward that can inspire so many others during this conversation. I noted them all. There is one that I want to highlight, which is the peer-to-peer learning or capacity building spaces that is so important and to the core of our different organizations, from IPU to International IDEA or to UCLG, because it's also a matter of how we create knowledge, which is very much important to create it in a grounded way, so anchored in your experiences, and also having a circular logic where we share rather than we teach, right? I think this is very, very important. So it's also something that we can include as a dimension in even like all the different other tools that that you've mentioned. And now, Xenia, yes.
We're getting there. Thank you very much, Cecile, and everyone for the comments and interventions. Yeah, I just wanted to circle back to what you raised, Cecile, and others as well, in terms of supporting networks, especially among women. And to say that we've seen in not too many, but just in few cases, groups of, for example, staff of parliament, getting together to work on solutions to violence against women staff in parliament. But we've also always seen how much caucuses of women parliamentarians, when they exist, where they exist in parliaments, have been instrumental in advancing, of course, gender equality legislation and actions in general terms, but also solutions within parliaments. I remember also a few years back in Senegal, one woman MP being attacked because she was pregnant. And there was a movement among all the other women parliamentarians all together condemning the attacks and reacting extremely strongly as one voice, which created a whole, a huge difference in showing how much any attack on any woman in the parliament would be absolutely unaccepted, and that there is a countering as a group. So I think you mentioned that, and Christina as well. So I just wanted to emphasize on it too. I think the pledge mentioned by Pam Damoff is extremely interesting as well. Like you, Christina, I mean, I was also thinking it can make a huge difference. It's an announcement. It's a commitment to act properly. But I think it definitely makes a huge difference. And then a big thank you to Yvonne for her testimonial, because it showed each and every step. When you said at the beginning that online violence, there is a continuum, and that it may start online and then end up by becoming offline violence, and even leading to homicides, and I mean, her story definitely shows how online violence can be impactful in the transformation towards offline violence. But she also raised the issue of reporting, and I think this has to become a kind of a focus. We can think about policies, we can think about legislation, which are absolutely essential. We can think about working with tech companies and all of that, which are absolutely necessary. But we need also to fix the reporting mechanisms and the capacities to hear survivors and to address cases of violence, be it online or offline. Without that, I think things are going to be very limited. So Cecile, I think we've already started speaking about solutions big time, but over to you for the next session. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And of course, we started speaking of solutions because we need them, and it's like the focus of our work, right? All of us. So we want to open a space now to dive deeper, let's say, in this discussion around solutions, and open a space where we can share ideas, experiences that have worked or not so much, and also priorities for the month, years ahead. So now in this second segment, we want to talk about different things, but mainly on about legal and policy orientations and priorities, about existing inspiring practices, and then also the innovations that we need, right? So I want to invite you now for the first intervention from Dr. Sieda Rim Hussein. You are the program and advocacy lead of Nala Feminist Collective and one of the key partners forming with us all the Generation Equality Forum Action Coalition on Feminist Movements and Leadership. And I'd like you to share how your organization is empowering women and what you're doing concretely to address this question of online violence, especially towards women with high online visibility.
Thank you, Cecile. There's going to be a little bit of background noise with my son. So NALFM is a Pan-African multi-generational collective advancing African women political leadership by shifting the power of convening through funding and politics to young feminists. And I'll just mention, I've really been loving, the conversations that are happening. So just to feed in and just jump straight into some of the solutions that we're trying to advance as a collective. So one of them is research. We've seen and we love the IPU research, and it's been really foundational for a lot of our advocacy that we've been doing on the continent. But something that we're seeing is that we need to go further down and really look at country now data, right? And so we're starting this process at NALFM where starting in Tunisia, where we're doing research on TFGVB with women politicians. To try and capture, if there's any, gaps and nuances. And I'm really loving the gap that was mentioned in terms of the gap of staff and the effect of this online violence with staff. So it's something that we will pick up for this research. And that's going into as well some upcoming regional consultations that we'll be having to feed into the CSW process around justice, because we really want to frame as well, online violence as a justice issue. And I think this is an opportunity, and you and women who are here on the call can speak more to it, but this is an opportunity for us to really start to frame and ground the language in justice and what it means for online violence for women politicians. So we'll be doing these consultations in Cameroon, South Africa, and Nigeria and Cameroon, and then this in-depth research project in Tunisia. We're also, and I really loved when Christine spoke about and called them virtual war rooms, because that's really, as a collective of women politicians as well, in practice we've seen that has really been the key in terms of support, where women are able to jump on to online as well, back each other up, but also have a space where, because we work Pan-Africanly, having a space where the women politicians in our network can just reach out to each other and feedback into, this is happening, what should I do, and not feel alone. In conversations with them and some of our research, we've seen that it's really been moments of gaslighting where they feel am I really, I'm making a big deal out of this post, or I'm making, but having them have a space with other women politicians who are living similar experiences to reassure them and really give them that support, and just, like Christine said, this virtual war room of solidarity across borders, across continents, is something that we're very interested in working towards. And so we have been talking to several partners and still open to talking to partners to really push for the creation of a digital tool or platform that could be used for women to do one thing is, this ongoing data collection. So it's not so, because it's very burdensome to keep doing, interviews and focus group discussions throughout the years, to ask women to keep re-traumatizing themselves by telling these stories, but having a central, some sort of platform where we can collect up-to-date data where women can report, share their stories, but also a space for us to use in terms of like building this war room, right? So instead of just reporting, having like tangible, these are the tools, this is support if it comes to, in a specific country, they're having issues with reporting it and going through the, legal judicial system. To also this just very sisterhood sort of support, especially for the young women, having an intergenerational space with like elder women who have been in the political space for longer to feel that they're not alone. We've seen that that's also a specific thing that has been helpful in these war rooms, having those prominent elder women being there and supporting them and seeing them. So being seen is, I think, something that is really at the foundation of some of the work that we're doing. And I'll stop there because I'm just really enjoying, just like hearing, everybody, coming in, and it's especially I saw the point about like, beyond advocacy, right? How do we, straight away, like, hands-on war room support and start moving. Back to you, Cecile.
Thank you so much. And this is exactly the intention that we have behind creating this kind of spaces, right? And I want to pick up on something among all the different things that these spaces can allow us to do together. There is one thing which is the denormalization of violence by sharing these experiences and saying, I lived this and I saw this and someone else went through this, then it can also help us to all see even the most like the yet invisible layers of violence that we still see as sort of normal or something that we need to go through. Yes or no, right? And I think this is definitely part of this work that we can do together, and behind the sharing of experiences, it's also taking like this advantage of being together and being able to go into details and share very concrete and very terrific experiences, but also seeing what others are going through, and maybe even recognizing in our trajectories or your trajectories what could also be part of this structural violence, right? And something else that I want to highlight from what you said is the importance of intergenerationality. So these logics of mentorship that were also mentioned earlier between different women and at different stages in their political careers to support each other, and obviously to go beyond the divisions that are like so easy to see, and because we're beyond that right now, I guess, but also to make something out of these differences that we can find between like the different experiences of each other, and building upon that as a strength, right? I want to go first. I want to open the floor now again. So again, go and think about solutions that you want to share within this group, or any experiences or priorities that you want us to take into account collectively. And I want to start with Mrs. Al-Jaida, who asked for the floor in the chat, and then I will go to you, the Member of Parliament from Bahrain. Thank you so much to both. Mrs. Al-Jaida, I'm not sure if you're hearing me. Otherwise, we can do the reverse, and you go after another person so that you're ready. Okay, let's see. We can start with you, Maria Maldane, and then we'll go to the others one.
Hi, can you hear me first of all?
Yeah, perfectly.
Yeah, I would like just to add on to this. I mean, in Bahrain, we have a completely different scenario when it comes to violence and, towards any woman, to be honest. It doesn't matter if she's a parliamentarian or she's a housewife or she's working within government. I mean, we have zero tolerance when it comes to any violence towards any woman. I don't know if you realize that, previously we spoke about the Supreme Woman Council that Her Highness has established, the wife of the king. This Supreme Council, tackle all the issues when it comes to women. Violence was one of the main topics, that it was tackled in the past. They started, initiating programs within the ministries to educate, against violences at work, at workplace, whether it is like ministries or schools or anything like that. Again, we had other programs. They started educating kids as well from a very young age about, how the violence could happen, what the causes of those violences, is it because of psychological problems or some other issues, and how these kids can come up, strongly to speak about it, that if they are, abused from a very young age, because sometimes that can traumatize them and that can affect them, when they become a little bit older. Also, we established the zero tolerances policies in everywhere, when it comes to hospitals, schools, ministries, airports, everywhere. So there are certain, laws and legislation takes action against anyone who, traumatize or violence a woman, regardless if it is a man towards a woman or a woman towards a woman. So it's all zero tolerance and a very, very strong laws when it comes to that. Sometimes it could be imprisonment in some cases. But, if we actually try to go through those databases, and we can see, these things has completely, disappeared, in the past, 5 to 6 years. There might be one or two cases, but again, it was dealt with them in a very professional way. And, even the people who went through those violences, if the woman was traumatized, she will go through certain channels to relieve the effect of that violence. And also the person who caused the problem, with the person who actually was traumatizing or violating a woman, also will go through a certain medical test just to see what is the cause of that. Plus, we created a hotline as well for women. So there is a hotline of anything, a kid or a woman or a worker, whoever it is, they can pick up the phone and speak. Even if it is a man who saw another man abusing a woman or a woman who abused another woman, there is a hotline that they can go and, they can speak about the cases, and those information are completely kept, very professionally, discreet. So this is not like someone is going to come back towards these people and try to threaten them. Also, they focused on creating platforms, awareness groups, awareness tools, health lines as well, focus groups that they can discuss these things, and also try to come up with some research methodologies that they can, put this into research in the future. So also, they have research that is gone through universities. So we can see if all these measures that has been taken towards these issues is being performed in the right way. They are actually applicable. They are effective. So all of these measures has been taken. Also, we started to talk about, the equal opportunity groups, and we have that in our parliament as well. But we have moved from the equal opportunity now, and we started in the empowering the woman, because of the word itself, empowerment, that also gives the woman itself the effect of being stronger and can talk about herself freely and without any issues. So we have taken a lot of these steps forward, and we have seen that our country has tackled this, and we started to work with other countries now to give our examples and experiences to them.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much for sharing such a comprehensive package, let's say, because there are I think it helps to also divide in categories what is possible and what is working. And it's really helpful to know all these experiences on your side. And it's also the political commitment behind, right? That also is inspiring. So there is the question of awareness raising and with the education from the very beginning.
Yes.
So of course, our discussion now is in politics or just before with the elections and so on, but it starts way before.
Yes.
So of course, so important to include children in the thought that we make behind this all the strategies. Then there is the legal and regulation part, and also the translation into practice, because we know so many laws that we never see coming real, right? And then there's the question of the safety and support frameworks with the hotline and the research. Because as you've mentioned, we also need to measure impact. We need to have evidence-based policymaking, but then we also need to be able to measure progress, setbacks, etc., and to compare that with the feeling also. Because we've been speaking about this, the backlash against women's rights or women's political participation in particular. It's also important to see where those mechanisms have been set in place to regulate violence. What is working, how exactly the nitty-gritty of it, so that then we can replicate and scale up. So thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thanks. I think we have maybe another intervention from Mrs. Al-Jaida. I'm not sure if you still want to take the floor, but if you do, feel free to come in. You're welcome to do so.
مساء الخير. ما أدري تسمعوني؟
Yes, please go.
بداية أعرب عن بالغ تقديري للاتحاد البرلماني الدولي وشركائه على تنظيم هذا الحوار الذي يتزامن مع اليوم الدولي للقضاء على العنف ضد المرأة، ويأتي استكمالا للمبادرات التي تهدف إلى التصدي للعنف الرقمي الذي بات يشكل أحد أبرز التحديات أمام مشاركة النساء في الحياة السياسية. معكم أمينة الجيدة، عضو مجلس الشورى في دولة قطر. في هذا السياق حرصت دولة قطر على تطوير منظومة قانونية متقدمة توفر حماية رقمية فعالة لجميع الأفراد، وبالأخص النساء اللواتي يتعرضن للعنف بسبب مشاركتهن السياسية. فقد تضمن قانون مكافحة الجرائم الإلكترونية رقم 14 لسنة 2014 نصوصا واضحة تجرم الاعتداء على الخصوصية والتشهير عبر الوسائط الرقمية ونشر البيانات الشخصية دون إذن، فضلاً عن تجريم استخدام الشبكة للإساءة أو الابتزاز. كما يشتمل قانون العقوبات القطري رقم 11 لسنة 2004 على مواد تجرم السب والقذف والتهديد وانتهاك الحياة الخاصة، وهي جرائم تنطبق بطبيعتها على الفضاء الرقمي. إضافة إلى ذلك عزز قانون حماية الخصوصية والبيانات الشخصية رقم 13 لسنة 2021 الضوابط المتعلقة بمعالجة البيانات ومنع إساءة استخدامها، وهو تطور مهم في حماية النساء من الاستغلال الرقمي. وتؤكد دولة قطر من خلال رؤيتها الوطنية 2030 التزامها بتعزيز تمكين المرأة ودعم مشاركتها في مواقع صنع القرار، وذلك عبر البيئة التشريعية والمؤسساتية التي تحمي حقوقها، وتواجه التحديات الرقمية المستجدة بمقاربات فعالة تضمن أمنها وكرامتها. كما يلعب مجلس الشورى في قطر دورا محوريا في تعزيز الرقابة التشريعية وتطوير السياسات المتعلقة بالأمن الرقمي، لا سيما تلك التي تصون حقوق المرأة في الحياة السياسية. ويعمل المجلس على دراسة التحديات المرتبطة بالعنف الرقمي المستجد واقتراح التعديلات التشريعية التي تعزز الحماية من التزييف العميق والابتزاز وحملات التشهير المنظمة، إلى جانب دعمه للبرامج الوطنية والإقليمية الهادفة إلى بناء المرونة الرقمية. لدى النساء السياسيات، كما يتعاون المجلس مع الجهات الحكومية المختصة لتعزيز التوعية بآليات الإبلاغ والحماية القانونية وتمكين المرأة من التعامل مع الهجمات الرقمية بطريقة مدروسة وفعالة. ختاماً، أود التأكيد أن ضمان فضاءات رقمية آمنة للمرأة السياسية ليس مطلباً حقوقياً فحسب، بل هو ركيزة من ركائز الأمن المجتمعي والاستقرار السياسي، وأن دولة قطر من خلال برلمانها ومؤسساتها الوطنية تواصل دعم الجهود الدولية الرامية إلى إنصاف المرأة وتعزيز مشاركتها في المجال العام وحمايتها من جميع أشكال العنف سواء كان مباشراً أو رقمياً. هذا ما كان لدي، والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Thank you so much for your contribution and for sharing all these different layers and policies and steps taken, and also for highlighting these connections between what we can do on a legislative dimension, what is being done also in terms of the empowerment of women themselves, and the way this needs to nurture each other, right? So thank you very much for sharing this. I want to ask if there is anyone else who wants to take the floor and share solutions or priorities at this point, just before we close this roundtable. And of course, it's a conversation that will continue in different ways. Mainly and including the CSW, the Commission on the Status of Women next year, focusing on women's political participation and access to justice is mentioned. I see one hand, but I don't see it anymore. So I don't know if it was, okay, go ahead. Was not sure if it
very
was
quickly, please, because we need to wrap up. The interpreters will have to stop soon. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Well, just very quickly, just one priority that I think that we should address is measurement and evaluation. And currently there are a lot of different instruments that are being put out there. However, an open question is, how do we evaluate how efficient they are?
Very good question, and we will need to work on that, but it's always important to have this in mind when designing those processes, right? So I want to thank you all on my end. It was really a pleasure to facilitate this conversation, and I want to hand it over to Zaina for the closing remarks and also the ways forward. Thank you all so much.
Thank you very much. A big thank you, Cécile, for your moderation of this event. And if I can give you an applause, thank you very, very much for your for this moderation and the good job you did. I would like also to thank all the partners who have been with us today: UN Women, the European Union. Of course, UCLG, represented in part by you, Cécile, as well as International IDEA. A big thank you to our participants. It was really great to have you, and we really hope that this event was powerful in providing information, a space for reflection, but also a call to action that was useful for all of you. A big thank you to all our panelists and all the persons who have contributed with their powerful stories and testimonials, their powerful research, their powerful advice on solutions and ways to go. A big thank you to each and every one of you. So to conclude, Cécile, a short recap on key takeaways. Of course, the frameworks to prevent and address online violence were very much brought up by close to each and everyone who took the floor today. but including policy and legal frameworks, but also the importance of measurement and evaluation, as was said by Sophia Collignon. And related to that, maybe a need to always, stay up to date and innovate. The legislation alone is not enough. The world of online developments is going so fast. The pace is so fast that changes need to be addressed and refreshed all the time. Financing and implementation, I think you've all mentioned how important enforcement of policies, legislations, measures, and frameworks is. Related to that, I think several of us have mentioned how multi-stakeholders approaches were essential, including work between political decision makers, tech companies, but also implementers of legislation such as judges, the police, including for reporting purposes. So this multi-stakeholder approach seems to be really necessary, and several of you have pointed out to it. And then the supporting networks, I think that also came very, very strongly, including through yourself, Cécile, to call for the establishment of such networks, their use when they already exist, to build solidarity, but also maybe to include men in the equation. I think it's very strong as well to have men speaking out against violence against women in all its forms and wherever it is, wherever it happens. And finally, something that was brought up by Ms. Naim from the Maldives are, the issue of capacity, the peer-to-peer mentorship, which is also really important, and the question of public awareness, which came out, as well as education brought up by Ms. Al-Dahain from Bahrain as a really important dimension that we should not forget, especially in building up the younger generations' awareness and action against violence in society in general, in the family, and up to politics. I would like to remind our participants of the upcoming tools to be produced and launched by UN Women in the coming days. We will all keep, our attention to upcoming tools and policy papers and model legislation, so that these new frameworks can serve our work. With that, I would like to thank you again, all of you. We really hope this virtual roundtable was useful, and we trust that it will be impactful, and that you will let us know if you need any support on our end. Cécile, can I leave the final word to you?
No, thank you so much. And again, thank you to all of you. Thank you for sharing so many ideas, priorities, etc., and also so many resources in the chat. And yeah, we have work to do, but we're together. We know how to do this. So we'll continue. Thank you so much, and see you soon.
Goodbye, everyone.